independent Pentagon watchdog has found that the Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth could have endangered the lives of American troops when he used the messaging app Signal to discuss a planned US attack on militants in Yemen. But the Inspector General's office concluded that Pete Hegseth did not violate rules on classified material. Well, the investigation looked into the unwitting inclusion of a journalist in a chat group that was discussing those American airstrikes on Yemen. So let's get more on this with CBS News' Jared Hill in New York. Jared, just remind us what this is all about and why Pete Hegseth was in trouble over this.
Right, so the big question here, Ben, is whether Pete Hegseth, the Defense Secretary, was using an improper application, improper device to talk about whether it's secret or classified information on this. And what this Inspector General found is that in this text chain, this group chat chain on the messaging app Signal back in the spring of this year, that they say that he was in fact violating DoD policy because he was using his personal phone to discuss information that had been marked secret, although not necessarily classified. Now, one of the big questions is whether Pete Hegseth declassified some of this information on his own before it was shared in this messaging application. Big picture, though, they say that the messaging and the words that he was using on the platform that he was using it potentially could have put military members at risk of some kind of danger. What we're seeing in terms of response and reaction, though, is Pete Hegseth saying that this exonerates him, basically saying that he didn't do anything wrong with this one. And it seems, at least as of now, the White House is still backing him.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you, I mean, he's such a controversial, polarizing figure, Pete Hegseth. How damaging do you think this is then? Or does he think that, as you say, it has exonerated him?
So he says it exonerated him. The White House is also saying that this is basically clearing Pete Hegseth as well. But he is currently embroiled in this as well as another scandal, essentially, that is taking a lot of attention away from some of the other things that he potentially could be doing. Obviously, today there is also the ongoing investigation into the drone or into the strikes on alleged drug boats in the Caribbean and whether some of this was a war crime, which some members of both parties in Congress are alleging. Pete Hegseth has been a very effective communicator for President Trump, someone that President Trump handpicked, that President Trump likes a lot, it seems. And so a big question is, will any of this dampen that relationship as there are calls for Hegseth to resign from at least Democrats in Congress?
All right, Jared, thank you very much. Jared Hill there from CBS. And as Jared was just mentioning there, that whole Signal chat controversy is a bit of a further embarrassment for Pete Hegseth, who has been strongly criticised, as Jared was mentioning, over the deadly strikes on an alleged trafficking boats in the Caribbean. Now, one such incident on September the 2nd has become the focal point of controversy. That's when an initial strike on a so-called narco boat or an alleged trafficking boat left 2 survivors clinging to the burning vessel before a second strike then killed both of those survivors. Now, Democrats say that the allegations first reported by the Washington Post newspaper could amount, in fact, to a war crime, and Republicans have also voiced their concerns about it. So let's talk about this now to Liz Goodwin, who's national political reporter for the Washington Post. Thanks very much for being with us. Well, we're just hearing about Pete Hegseth with the whole Signal row. How much trouble is he in, do you think, over this controversy?
This is something that's really troubling lawmakers of both parties, which is a little bit rare on the Hill to see Republican lawmakers openly questioning Trump administration officials. And this is one issue that has galvanized that type of reaction. So today, Admiral Bradley, who was the officer in charge of this second strike, is going to be coming to Congress and answering questions from Republicans and Democrats on this strike. Hegseth, Defense Secretary Hegseth, has sort of changed his answer a little bit on if he was around for that second strike. At first, it sounded like he said he watched the whole thing live. And then once questions emerged about this second strike where survivors were allegedly killed, he then said he wasn't there for that, and he had left and he had another meeting. And so Admiral Bradley is the person that's really facing the heat now and has to answer questions about it.
And one of the questions that emerged when Pete Hegseth gave that quite detailed account of what happened and saying he was there for the first strike but not the second strike was he said after the first strike the vessel in question was actually on fire and there was a fog of war, which then raised questions from some people about why did the military need another strike on that vessel if it was already on fire?
Yeah, there's a bit of confusion right now in terms of was the objective to kill everyone on board, even when they were clinging to wreckage, essentially, were not on the boat, or was the objective to destroy the vessel? And apparently those two different objectives have different kind of legal weights behind them in terms of what's acceptable. So that's something that people are eagerly looking forward to hearing what Admiral Bradley says.
And there is just also the question of a sort of wider American potential military operation with Venezuela, isn't there? Donald Trump's talked about, a war a war on drugs, not only at sea, but on land.
There is. Yesterday, I think it was that President Trump said, we're going to continue these strikes and we might even do them on land. He's also been urging Maduro, the president there, to leave the country. There's a desire for a regime change that I think some Republican hawks support, but it's not getting that same type of support that we usually see, like on the Iran strikes, for example, when he struck the nuclear facilities. There was really this rallying excitement among hawks in the party, and this time it's just a little bit more muted, I would say. And then on the America First, more isolationist wing of the party, there's really open questions of the president's strategy here, more directed at Secretary Hegseth instead of President Trump. But there is not that enthusiasm for a foreign entanglement here in some wings of the party.
And just in terms of those attacks on these alleged drug trafficking boats, what do ordinary Americans, do you think, make of that? Because as you were saying, a lot of concern in Congress about the legality of these military strikes. But do they generally have popular support, do you think, in America?
I haven't seen polling on this yet. I'm not sure if it has been polled, but I think that most Americans probably see strikes on drug boats as different than a potential war. It's, if it's just defined as killing drug traffickers, that might have support because the actual issues around the legality of it are a little bit higher brow.
Liz, thank you very much, as ever. Liz Goodwin, their national political reporter for The Washington Post. Thank you.